The Club is the 18th episode of the second season of Frasier. This is directed by David Lee, and as always, there will be spoilers as I talk about various aspects of this episode. And I really enjoyed this episode. It's also very, very similar, well, moderately similar to an episode in the reboot. I'm not suggesting the reboot basically copied the narrative because it's quite different, but certainly having recently watched that one, it's quite fun to then rewatch this episode because it focuses on the fact that Niles is trying to get into the Empire Club, and there is this dinner that they go to, and the hope is that one of them will get in because there are two vacancies that have opened up. So Niles and Frasier both go, and because Frasier's date wasn't able to go, he actually took Daphne as well, and he instructs Daphne to call him Frasier, so it seems like they are together, and she had really good fun with that. And watching it, I had good fun as well. It's really interesting to see her, or hear her, I guess, calling him Frasier rather than Dr. Crane. The costumes were great, the evening attire looked lovely. It's really nice to see the characters just looking a little bit different. Unfortunately, when they get to the dinner, they realise that there's only one membership, and they both keep trying to sabotage each other. And we have a mention of something that happened in an episode of Cheers. And I don't want to go into too much detail in case you haven't seen it, but it's something Frasier did regarding Lilith. And Diane is also mentioned, not by name, but as the barmaid Frasier was shacked up with. So I rather enjoyed the various subtle Cheers mentions. But the great thing about this is that even if you haven't seen Cheers, certainly the first time I watched Frasier, I hadn't seen Cheers. I watched Frasier first. Those references meant nothing to me, but it's still delivered in a way that you can get a brief insight into what their past was like, such as when we get an insight into things Niles has done. Obviously, we haven't never seen that before, and it works very much the same way with Frasier, but if you have seen Cheers, it's just an extra little something special. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. The scene where they're both in the coffee shop afterwards apologising to each other, I really enjoyed. I also really liked the fact that they both take turns to be the first to apologise. And Niles points out that he apologised first last, so it was Frasier's turn, and he backed down pretty quickly and apologised first. And it was just a really sweet moment. But the moment is kind of ruined for Niles very quickly, as Frasier takes the phone call after Niles having learned that he didn't get in, and Frasier learning that he did. And I was really surprised by how quickly Frasier turned things around. And as I said, these are big spoilers for things that happen. When Frasier decided he was going to go down to the Empire Club and tell them that they needed to give the spot to Niles, I didn't expect it to happen quite so quickly, and it was very moving and really sweet of Frasier. And he is right, Niles has been in Seattle this whole time, trying to get in, whereas Frasier has been off in Boston. He's only been back for a few years. It's not really fair. But at the same time, if he got in on his own merit, and they wanted him rather than Niles, that's also not necessarily Frasier's fault. And there was never any guarantee, and the episode didn't actually touch on this, but there was never any guarantee that the second spot would have went to Niles. Frasier might have been their top choice, but Niles wasn't necessarily their second choice. If Frasier decided to back down and not join the club, it could have gone to somebody else other than Niles. Maybe that still would have eased Frasier's conscience, I don't know, but that's definitely not the way the episode went, because it turns out that they got the names mixed up. And this doesn't say much for Frasier's celebrity, that they didn't actually recognise him as not being Niles or recognise him as being Dr. Frasier Crane, but they got them mixed up, and they thought that Niles was Frasier and Frasier was Niles, and they wanted Niles, but Niles kind of ruined his chances. And it's a brilliant moment that's really well delivered. I think the element of surprise there is definitely very strong, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. A few other small highlights from the episode. One I thought was adorable is when they're talking in Frasier's apartment about skeletons in their closet, and it cuts to Martin opening a beer can, and the foam or froth or whatever sprays all over him, and it was just a really, really sweet moment. And Eddie has also learned to beg, and he begs a couple of times in this episode, and he's beautiful. I absolutely love him. So, a really great episode, really thoroughly enjoyable. And as I said, Daphne calling him Frasier was also a highlight. And the narrative is certainly unpredictable and a lot of fun. The club is definitely a great episode. I don't think it's one of my all time favourites. Probably not even one of my all time favourites from season 2. But that being said, it's still a pretty brilliant episode.